They laughed when I stumbled, whispering behind my back as if I'd never rise again. They thought my failure was the end of me, but little did they know it was only the beginning. Because one day the tables would turn and I'd be the one getting the orders. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more powerful stories. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The room smelled faintly of coffee and stale air, the hum of computers filling the silence, until my mistake turned into the punchline of the office. My presentation had glitched, my numbers didn't add up, and the client, instead of nodding with interest, looked annoyed and unimpressed, and then it happened, snickers from the back row. A few hushed whispers. By the time I walked out of the conference room, red-faced and humiliated, I could hear the laughter. Not the playful kind, but the cruel, sharp-edged type that cuts deeper than words. Guess they're not promotion material, after all. One of my colleagues muttered loud enough for me to hear. Another chimed in. Some people just aren't built for leadership. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to keep walking, pretending their voices didn't echo in my head. Pretending their smirks didn't burn into me. At my desk, I opened my laptop, my hands trembling. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. Should I quit? Should I just disappear and never look back? But then something inside me shifted. A quiet, stubborn voice whispered, "No, this isn't the end. This is just the beginning." That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone had left. My screen glowed against the darkness, spreadsheets and reports piling up as I combed through every detail of the project I'd failed. I wasn't going to sleep, not when I had something to prove. By dawn, my eyes burned, but my heart was steady. I wasn't just going to fix my mistakes, I was going to become unstoppable. Little did I know. The same people laughing at me now would one day choke on their own words. From that day forward, I stopped caring about the gossip, the stares, the whispers when I walked into the break room. Instead, I built a plan, a silent plan no one could see coming. Every morning, I arrived earlier than everyone else. Every evening, I stayed late, pouring myself into work that wasn't even mine. I learned from every manager, studied every strategy, and made notes about every deal. I stopped just being an employee. I started preparing to be a leader. Still, the laughter never stopped. One afternoon, I overheard my so-called team in the cafeteria. "She's trying too hard," one said. "Yeah, like extra hours are gonna erase that disaster," another replied. I bit down on my tongue, holding back the anger. They didn't know that every insult was fuel. Every smirk, another reason to rise. Months passed and I became sharper, faster, smarter. I started noticing patterns others missed. I solved problems before they even appeared. And slowly, very slowly, the same people who mocked me began coming to me for help. "Hey, can you check these numbers for me? Do you think the client would like this approach?" I answered politely, but inside I smiled, because they didn't realize I was already ahead. Late one night, I stared at my reflection in the dark office window. My eyes were tired, but there was a fire burning in them I'd never seen before. This isn't about proving them wrong anymore, I whispered to myself. This is about proving me right. The laughter that once haunted me was fading, replaced with something stronger. Determination. And soon, they would learn the price of underestimating me. It happened one Monday morning. The air in the office was tense, everyone buzzing about an upcoming high-profile client pitch. This deal wasn't just big, it was massive. If we landed it, the company would skyrocket ahead of its competitors. I watched as the managers scrambled, each trying to outshine the other. They assigned tasks hastily, overlooking the small details. My name, of course, wasn't even on the list. Why would it be? To them, I was still the one who failed, but I didn't sulk. Instead, I quietly studied the client's profile, their past deals, and what they truly wanted. Every night that week, while the others celebrated their half-baked ideas over drinks, I was at home working, building something solid, something undeniable. On the day of the presentation, the managers pitched their plans, but the client's expression was flat, unimpressed. I could see it, their interest slipping away. My heart pounded. This was it. My moment. I leaned forward and whispered to my boss, "I think I have something that could help." He looked at me skeptically, then shrugged. "Fine. If you think you can save this mess, go ahead." The room went silent as I stood, laptop in hand. My palms were sweaty, but my voice was steady. Slide by slide, I laid out my strategy, tailored, sharp, and built on hours of unseen work. By the time I finished, the client wasn't just listening, they were nodding, smiling, excited. When the contract was signed minutes later, my boss looked at me differently. The same colleagues who once laughed were staring now, mouths slightly open. I had done it. Not just saved the deal, but proved I was more than they ever imagined. But this was just the beginning. After that day, things began to shift. My boss called me into his office more often. My suggestions, once brushed aside, were now taken seriously. Colleagues who mocked me started asking for my input, and yet I remembered. I remembered every smirk, every cruel laugh, every word meant to break me. I wasn't about to forgive so easily. Instead, I worked harder. Projects became my battlegrounds, and I fought for excellence in every detail. Slowly, my name spread beyond the office. Clients began to request me specifically. Senior executives started noticing. One evening, while packing up, I overheard two colleagues whispering, "Can you believe it? She's actually getting ahead. Yeah. At this rate, she'd be our manager soon." They said it with a mix of disbelief and jealousy. I smiled to myself, zipping my bag. Not long after, the inevitable happened. A management position opened. The competition was fierce. Those same colleagues who had laughed at me threw their names in, boasting about their experience. But when the results came in, it wasn't their names on the promotion letter. It was mine. Walking into my new office, with its glass walls and commanding view of the floor below, I felt a surge of emotions: triumph, vindication, power. The same people who once mocked me now sat at desks outside, waiting for my instructions, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the peak. No, this was only the first step in my revenge, because one day, I wouldn't just be their manager, I would be their boss. The first week as manager was surreal. The office looked the same buzzing phones, same clattering keyboards, but to me, everything had changed. The colleagues who once ignored me now forced smiles when I walked by. Their tones softened, their laughter hushed the moment I entered the room. Some even tried flattery, praising my decisions, pretending to have always believed in me. But I wasn't fooled. I noticed the subtle eye rolls when I assigned tasks, the way a few whispered in corners as though I hadn't caught on. They were hoping I'd fail in my new role, praying I'd crumble under the weight of responsibility. And maybe that's what fueled me most. I doubled down on discipline. Meetings were sharper, deadlines stricter. I made sure everyone knew there was no room for laziness. But I wasn't cruel, I was strategic. I gave opportunities to those who worked hard, even if they hadn't supported me before. Slowly, I built loyalty where there had once been disdain. Still, there were others, especially those who had laughed the loudest at my failure, who resented my rise. They couldn't accept that the joke of the office was now the one holding power over their careers. One evening, I stayed late and I overheard two of them plotting, "She's not going to last. We just need to find her weak spot. Yeah, she thinks she's untouchable now, but watch. Everyone falls eventually." I clenched my fists, silently stepping back into my office. Their words didn't scare me. No, they motivated me, because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building an empire, and when the moment was right, I would make sure those who once mocked me felt the full weight of their arrogance. Weeks turned into months, and the changes in the office were undeniable. My projects were thriving. Clients respected me. Upper management praised my strategies, but the resentment from certain colleagues simmered hotter with each success. One in particular, Daniel, the loudest of my critics, made no effort to hide his bitterness. He had been a favorite before my rise, always laughing the hardest at my expense. Now, every directive I gave him was met with resistance, until the day I got the perfect chance to flip the script. A critical client presentation was scheduled, and Daniel was supposed to lead it. He strutted into my office, smug as ever, claiming he had it all under control. I simply nodded and let him be, but when the day arrived, his presentation crumbled. Slides missing, data inaccurate, the client unimpressed. The room was tense, and Daniel's face went pale. That was when I stepped in calm, collected, prepared with a backup plan I had quietly built. Within minutes, I salvaged the meeting, turned it around, and secured the client's trust. When it was over, the client shook my hand, thanking me for saving the deal. Daniel stood frozen, humiliated in front of everyone. Later that evening, I called a private meeting with him. He shuffled in, avoiding my eyes. "Funny," I said coldly, leaning back in my chair. "I remember when you laughed at my failure. How does it feel to be on the other side?" He didn't answer. His silence was enough. From that day on, Daniel stopped mocking me. The others, too, began to tread carefully. They were starting to realize the truth. The girl they once laughed at was no longer their equal. She was becoming their biggest fear. By now, the office had shifted completely. I wasn't just the manager, I was the center of gravity. Every decision, every meeting, every strategy ran through me. And with power came silence. No one dared laugh at me anymore. Instead, their whispers had turned into forced admiration. But behind those fake smiles, I saw the unease. They weren't just respecting me, they feared me. And honestly, I let them. I learned something powerful in those months. Sometimes silence is the loudest weapon. I didn't need to call out their old insults or remind them of how they treated me. My success did all the talking, yet not everyone learned. Emma, one of my old tormentors, tried to undermine me in subtle ways. She'd accidentally leave me out of group emails or try to twist my words in front of others. She thought she was clever, but I watched her, quietly, patiently. One day, during a quarterly review, she presented numbers that didn't add up. Everyone in the room nodded along, not realizing her mistake. I sat there, calm, waiting for her to finish. Then, in the most composed tone, I corrected her. Not just with facts, but with evidence. Slide after slide, I laid out the truth. Her face flushed red, her confidence crumbled. The room turned cold. Afterwards, she tried to defend herself, but no one listened. For the first time, she felt what I had once felt: exposed, powerless, small, and I didn't need to gloat. I simply gave her the same smile she once gave me when I was down. Revenge, I realized, didn't always need fire. Sometimes it only needed light, and my light was blinding. By the end of the year, my story had traveled far beyond our office walls. Upper management recognized me as one of the most valuable leaders in the company. Invitations to speak at conferences poured in. Articles were written about the young manager who turned failures into victories. And while my professional life soared, the whispers of my past followed me like shadows. Former colleagues who once mocked me now reached out, asking for advice, pretending to be old friends. Some even begged me for referrals. It was almost laughable. One evening, I was invited to a grand company gala. Hundreds of people from across industries filled the hall. The stage lights shimmered, cameras flashed, and I stood there, ready to give a keynote speech. As I looked out into the crowd, I spotted familiar faces, Daniel, Emma, and several others who once laughed at my struggles. They sat quietly, forced to listen as the girl they once mocked commanded the stage. I took a deep breath and began. Failure, I said. My voice steady isn't the end. It's the foundation of success. The same people who laugh at you today may find themselves working for you tomorrow. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked. Every word echoed with weight. When I stepped off that stage, applause thundered around me. My name wasn't just respected anymore, it was celebrated. And in that moment, under those bright lights, I finally understood. They hadn't just laughed at my failure. They had unknowingly written the prologue to my greatest triumph. Life has a strange way of circling back. Months after the gala, I walked into the office to find Emma and Daniel sitting across from me in the boardroom, not as equals, but as employees reporting directly to me. The company had restructured. Departments merged, leadership shifted, and suddenly, the very people who once mocked me were now under my supervision. At first, they avoided eye contact, afraid of how I might treat them. Would I mock them? Would I humiliate them? Would I return the cruelty they had once shown me? Instead, I did something they never expected. I treated them with professionalism. No extra favors, no harsh punishments, just fairness. But that fairness carried its own sting, because every day they were reminded the girl they had laughed at was now their boss. The imbalance gnawed at them. Their pride couldn't handle the truth. I could see it in the way they shuffled papers nervously in meetings, the way their voices trembled when they presented to me. And yet, deep inside, I knew this was the sweetest revenge of all. Not anger, not shouting, not plotting, but forcing them to live every single day in the shadow of my success. I didn't have to take their dignity away. They gave it up themselves. With time, the bitterness I once carried began to fade. I had achieved more than revenge. I had achieved freedom. The same people who once laughed at me now respected me because they had no other choice. But their respect didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the respect I had for myself. I thought back to those dark nights when I doubted everything, when failure felt permanent and laughter felt like chains. If only that broken version of me could see me now standing tall, admired, unstoppable. Revenge had been my fuel. But victory became my identity. One evening, after a long day, I stood by the window of my office. The city lights stretched endlessly before me. I whispered to myself, they laughed at my failure. But now I've become the lesson they'll never forget. And with that, I smiled, because the story wasn't about them anymore. It was about me.